whether the reports will be accurate or true is immaterial. They'll show up, though.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense. And some great answers there. Thank you very much. Well, before I let you go,
Hang on a second.
Yeah,
By the way, to all those people,
yes,
that whether you think yourself a hybrid or any of this other is, and I can't dispute anybody, but I can say that there's evidence, and I have personal knowledge that humans are indeed a genetically modified species en masse. That there's no human on this planet now that is exhibiting DNA that hasn't been tampered with. Now, the DNA tampering in most cases may have happened millennia ago,
right,
but that's not to say that it's not ongoing. So basically what I'm saying is that, you all have your truth, and I'm not going to dispute it because there's a lot of facts behind it.
And that's something that I go into often too. That this whole evolution process that we now come to understand has been helped along the way many times.
Indeed so.
Well, okay, and got a few questions from
Sure.
the users for you. One of them, something we've been talking about, is the Gulf Stream. Seems to be a lot of propaganda and then information coming in kind of both ways. Do you see anything with that? There's a lot of information that it's slowing down. Obviously,
it's totally snarkered. It's been seriously fucked over.
Right.
Deliberately so. It was weakening anyway, and you have to understand the powers that be don't go on out and try and shift the orbit of the Earth. Right. They wait until there's a particularly appropriate point. And then they give a little nudge to cause something to occur. So they wanted the Gulf Stream to shut down for their purposes. They couldn't have done it 30 years ago. They were waiting for a particular period of time, and they went ahead and did do it quite deliberately. And so in my way of thinking, British Petroleum's is a tool of the powers that be,
right,
and that bastard that was at the head of it is merely the bastard who was chosen to be the spokesperson for a deliberate plot done by people that are so far above him that he's not even aware they exist. And he was just following orders. But they did do it. Europe is screwed. The weather patterns on the northern hemisphere are going to lead to massive famine. I cannot emphasize this enough. Every human needs to start taking their food supply at a personal damn level and grow as much as they can, even if it's only a few jars of sprouts in their house, because it's going to get so bad, and in fact it already is there now. We are now entering the 10th year of net grain loss. We are not growing as much. For the last 10 years, we've not grown as much grain on the planet as humans have been consuming.
Wow.
Now, true, we're quite wasteful, and if we stopped eating cows, we'd have vast quantities of grain, and none of us would starve. But because the powers that be are bloodthirsty and love sucking blood, and they have this whole death and must eat death and must eat blood thing going, they will try and continue that. And the poor sheeple that out there consuming these the flesh of all of these genetically modified cows and all of this with all the hormones and everything, who are not in good shape anyway, they will not recognize what's going on. And when all of the cows are no longer available, these people will starve, and you will see starvation deaths in the northern hemisphere over 2011 and 2012 until we get our shit together and start taking back our power, which is to decentralize and put this in your own hands. In order to make your life more pleasant, learn now while you have the ability to get at some of the materials and you're not in a pressure to produce calories rapidly. It's going to come very fast, though. I suspect the first point of famine in the northern hemisphere to appear this spring, and it probably will start in the U.S.
At what point, and I've already seen some of the weather changes in Europe, it seems like happening this winter. At what point do you think that'll become more dramatic?
This summer. I suspect that just like in, or quote, the summer period, after the June solstice, which is technically summer, I suspect we'll still have snow in the northern hemisphere coming down.
Wow. Okay, great, good answer there, and that was something I've been very interested in too. And you think in Northern America too? Any ideas or any indications from the webbot as to how that will influence our weather pattern? I mean, it'll have to be a world.
Oh yeah. We're screwed too. We're going to go into glaciation. Another way to stop, for instance, a potential pole shift, crustal shift, is to bind everything up in ice. Okay, because it can't shift if it's all capped, so to speak. You find that in those planets that are icebound, you get plenty of earthquakes, but you don't get large-scale movements.
Okay, gotcha, makes sense.
So in North America, by the way, I wouldn't count on food from California this year. I wouldn't count on food from Florida. We may be lucky to produce some small levels of of grain harvest out of the Midwest. And a lot of it will be what we'll be told will be weather related. And to a certain extent, in a sense, it will be, but it's really more climate. Our climate, we've reached what we've been describing since 2003 as sudden, catastrophic climate change.
Right. Right. Well, and on that topic, what would be some things that people should get to prepare for what's coming? Obviously, food. I always tell everybody wheat, rice, and pinto beans. You can buy 10-pound bags for about $10-11 here where I live. What would be some other things?
But bear in mind that that's not in any way a permanent solution.
Right.
Once those beans are gone, you don't have those. They don't store well either. Even canned beans lose any canned foods lose nutritional values. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the thing that keeps humans alive is education. Now, I'm not talking schooling, because there's a big difference, as Mark Twain observed, between schooling and education. So going out and educate yourself on the calories needed to keep a human alive long term. And you'll start reading Francis Moore Lapp and Food Combining, and basically end up as a vegetarian diet. That being the case, get real smart, investigate vegetarianism and veganism, and you'll discover, for instance, that in 3 square feet with a single fluorescent grow light, you can produce nearly 50% of the calories that is needed for an adult vegan diet, using what are known as sprouts and soaks. And this use of seeds also would allow you to have a small, even a terrace garden. I mean, I could do this in an appropriately facing balcony. I could grow enough plants to produce enough seed to provide me with broccoli and other kinds of sprouts. I couldn't do alfalfa, for instance, or any field crop, but I could do those kind of things that would produce a high-quality vegan protein that can be used to supplement whatever else I'm able to obtain from universe in general. And we will see this. The United States, Northern Europe, less so in China, but more so in Western Russia. We'll see large-scale impacts on our food supplies. And in fact, we're seeing it now. If you start looking, I have these spiders that go out that read news all the time, and they report back to me on, oh, here's this language showing up. It's a feedback loop, so I know that our forecasts can be monitored and we can make improvements as we go along.
Right.
So we're already seeing the expected food problem languages up here in the northern part of the country, because we're not receiving the shipments of food from California because of all of the rain. Stores are running out of stuff up here. We don't have today there were reports out of Montana, North Dakota, Eastern Washington, some parts of Canada, as to stores running out of material on the shelves in the form of fresh fruit and vegetables.
Right. And it's something I've noticed actually here where I am too. In spurts, it happens. How about in terms of finances and things like that? Precious metals obviously have gone through the roof recently.
We've seen nothing yet. There will come a crash this year, not of the Dow or any of that, but of currencies.
Right.
We may be within weeks of that, and it may actually start on January 7th, as we were initially discussing. Okay, that currency crash will escalate precious metals maybe to the point where you have an ounce of gold equal to an ounce of silver, and if you were stupid enough to convert that ounce of gold to paper money, you might receive 60 or 80,000 U.S. dollars for it.
Wow. So that would be a wise direction for people to move if they have some paper currency at this year, then, huh?
I would say you do it secondarily. Okay, preserving wealth is the idea that you're going for with the purchase of precious metals, because the powers that be are destroying the currencies and thus taking your wealth away from you. Okay, so the idea is not to make money with buying precious metals,
right,
but rather preserve the assets you have.
Right.
Well, before I personally would invest a dime in silver, I would put my dime into my food supply. And I'm not talking buying freeze-dried, although plenty of people can seem to exist on it. My vibrational state is such that I can't live on those dense, compacted foods. It just doesn't work.
Right.
So in my case, what I'm doing is I'm getting the extra little 18-inch grow bulbs, and I'm putting in some more fluorescence, and I'm refining my system of food production here on my little tiny place in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay, great. That sounds good. And any other? I guess before we go, I'll ask you, would there be one major event or date that you're looking at 2011 saying, this one looks like a big one to me, or is it possible to pick it by date or even a span of days?
It's a span, and it's relative to, it's actually it's kind of a coin toss. The question for me this year, above everything, is which of the solar cycles will go into continuous activity. The whole CA thing, the whole continuous activity thing has to be understood. We'll reach because we're in a solar process that is reaching a crescendo and will start a whole new cycle soon. And we're at the end of that solar cycle. We're at a point where solar activity will become extreme. And we'll start using words like extreme and severe and exceptional about it. And at some point, the activity of the sun will enter a cycle, and every single day of that 88-day cycle will produce effects here on the planet in the form of new volcanoes, new giant earthquakes, giant sinkholes forming, and this kind of stuff as Earth reacts. Now, bear in mind, it won't end with that 88-day cycle. The next 88-day cycle will also be continuous activity, but it'll just escalate. Okay. And so my thing for me is, which of these cycles? Will it be April 19th or will it be July 15th? I basically have a sort of a little bet going with some guys in Europe that it'll be the July 15th cycle that will start the continuous activity. And there's an interesting linguistic side effect from this, because whenever that continuous activity cycle starts, as a temporal marker, shortly thereafter we find a major shift, realignment, if you will, of emotional connotators and descriptors for the populace of the planet as a whole. Now, I'm choosing my words carefully here. One of these cycles will occur. We'll see activity on the sun that the mainstream media will have to report, just like they had to report what occurred on August 1, right, because it was so exceptional. Only we'll all feel it down here, so we'll know what's going on, and they'll have to start addressing it. And at that point, we'll see a mass awakening, a huge thirsting quest on the part of a significant portion of the populace of the planet. Now, that portion of the populace might only be 2 or 3%. It might not be 30%, but even that 2 or 3% suddenly waking up and deciding things are not in the reality structure that they've been sold by the powers that be, and that something is up, that 2 or 3% shift will cause a giant emotional wave to go around the planet Earth, and nothing will be the same from that point on. It won't be a tipping point. It's not like that. It's an entirely different, it's like a context shift, like we had a number of years back when all of a sudden the issue of illegal aliens in the United States, erupted out as though a spontaneous occurrence. That one was planned. This one isn't. And this one is going to take the powers that be not by surprise, but it will capture their attention in a way that nothing has in probably decades.
All right, well, it'll be fascinating stuff. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. I sure appreciate it. And if people want to follow you online, you have a website that they can go to, right?
Yeah, I've got halfpasthuman.com, but I don't want anybody following me. I want humans to go out and think for themselves.
Beautiful, I love it.
Assume all of my stuff is bullshit and go find your own answer.
Hey, mine too while you're at it.
Okay, there we go, man.
All right. Well, hey, thanks so much, Cliff. We sure appreciate it, and we'll be right back with Alien Addictions.